Hello. So this is part two of a series talking about my albums requested by a friend of mine. I did the first half talking about how long it takes to make music and stuff in a long rambly video of me walking through the woods. But here is part two, talking about my first full-length album. And the details are kind of hazy because there's no more copies of it that I know of. I think someone out there might have a copy, maybe not. But I started making music in around 1997, 1998, and I think I had a couple little EPs I did, but they weren't really anything until mp3.com came out. And they offered a service where you can have your album actually made into a CD. So I took advantage of that. I had to order my own first copy of it, but it was worth it to me to have a printed out jewel case, full album art, liner notes and everything. And I spent a good amount of time working on the album art and everything. It was pretty cool. And so at that point, it was around, let's back up a little bit, because mp3.com, they were a website. They're not the same website anymore, but anyone could go on there and upload their music. And this was dial-up internet days, most of the world. Anyone could upload their music there and have an album made. People could do compilations. They could buy single tracks. They could buy a whole album, and you could set your own prices. And you got a small percentage. I think they got the majority. But it was cool for me because I was about 19, 20 years old. At that time, I was doing experimental psychedelic tech step, drum and bass, jungle, using Modplug Tracker .it format, which is Impulse Tracker, because that had the most number of channels and effects that you could do. So that was like the most advanced mod format, it was called at the time. And at this point, I've been making music for a few years. And so I was getting, it was really repetitive and boring, but I was getting experimental, and I had some really cool sounds, really dark lo-fi sort of sound coming out. And so mp3.com also had kiosks in the mall where you could go and burn your own. You could get your own copy of my album, but it wouldn't come with the album art and all that. It would just be printed out. I guess there was like a laser inside there that would print the label on the CD itself. But basically it was CD-R. And then I also made my own copies with a Sharpie, and I used to burn a bunch of those, give them away, sell them to people, go give away just like CDs of my own random music at concerts, just go set them up by the bar and let people take them. And that was a fun time. So some of the tracks on there were, I believe the Robitussin Experiment was on this album. It might not have been. It might have came just after that. But that had a sample from Orson Welles' Transformers sample. But the reason I wanted to bring that up, Transformers the movie, Orson Welles going, I have summoned you here for a purpose. So that track, I believe that was 2003, so that might have been right after. But that track is when I feel like I finally changed. So that's going to be right after this. That's when I feel like I finally got good at making music. Before that, it felt like I was struggling and trying to get out of doing repetitive loops, things like that. DJ Phatz was the name that I went by until the Robitussin Experiment, when I changed it to Fat Kid. So when I was still DJ Phatz, I wasn't. I knew I wasn't to where I was proud of my music. I was still struggling with it. I was still proud of it, and I shared it with everyone. I didn't care. It kind of embarrassed me, but I still just shared it with every single person I met. Because this was before social media. You had to meet people and hang out. So, um, the reason I wanted to bring up the Robitussin experiment also is because I was trying to do psychedelic style. So I was experimenting with substances. Nothing bad, just psychedelics of different kinds. The Robitussin being the worst of all. That stuff is dangerous. Don't do it. It can kill you. But I couldn't find mushrooms at that time. I won't talk about that too much into detail. But other songs on so these were definitely on the rainbow colored fishies. I believe Hairy Nipples was actually after that. I don't know. It's been so long. Stuff Ninja Technique, I guess, was on there. Black and White Superman. Glass is Inherently Evil, I think, was on there. Bass Therapy, I think, was on there. I don't know, though. It was so long ago. But all of these songs were around that time. Early 2000s. Pre-2003. Or around 2003. Glass is Inherently Evil had a Duke Nukem sample of the glass breaking from Duke Nukem 3D. I did have some experiments with polyrhythm. That's what got me into the Robitussin experiment, to finally break out of doing repetitive house type style. But programming on Modplug Tracker was very tedious. And back then, this was before YouTube, before like you had to read manuals and then just practice. And I would download other people's music, because these were open source music files, mods.it.xm. So I would download other people's music and see how they made it. It's like reading source code. Because before that, growing up as a kid, I was into programming with computers. That's why I liked Modplug Tracker, because it was like programming sound with samples. And you program every trigger of every sound, effects, has to be hand programmed in. So I would read other people's source code basically, but when I would distribute my music, I usually wouldn't distribute mine in the .it format. I would give it out as MP3s or .ogg, because .ogg was better, and I would use not .zip, .rar. .rar was better compression, where people could download my music. And I got pretty good traffic back then. Whoa. Random people would message me and stuff. So that was cool. Different world altogether. I also had the Orb series of tracks. I think I went up to part 4, maybe part 5. Probably part 4. But they were just repetitive piano samples, and I would program in repetitive loops. All of this stuff was experimental at that time. Learning about music, studying music. I couldn't listen to music without trying to break it down inside my head like it was a computer program to understand how it was made. I would make at least one song, usually 3 songs per day, but they weren't really songs. They were little experiments of just ideas, just non-stop, constantly coming up with ideas, and then I would just make a short little track to experiment with that idea to learn. Yeah, so Rainbow Colored Fishies was my first album. It was on mp3.com, CDRs, Sharpie labels, kiosks, under the name DJ Phatz. I hope I have it saved somewhere on a hard drive somewhere. I'm not sure. But they're different from the original slightly, but as close as it gets. There's at least 2 or 3 people out there I know have copies of this. So that's it for this album. The next album after that, the best of, which was at a time when bands were coming out with best of albums while they were still coming out with new albums after that. So I made a tongue-in-cheek best of album, basically as my first as Phat Kid versus DJ Phatz, which came before that. All right, thank you. Have a good day. Bless each other up.